Relax, have a ciggy. You're listening to the Power Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week my guest is Nick Martini. If you don't know about Nick Martini, I'm not going to spoil it for you. He's a great guy who I've known for over a decade. When I met Nick, he was a pro skier who also owned a production company that made urban ski movies. He was pretty much a kid when I met him, but he always handled himself like an adult. He was a dude with no downtime. Sure, he still had just as much fun as his friends, but when he wasn't skiing or partying with them, he was getting work done. Whether it was planning shoots or talking to sponsors, he was way smarter than his age, and he and his Stept crew would chase storms all over the country to find the gnarliest of urban features. His crew would sleep 6 to a room, slumming it all in the hunt for clips. That's all a thing of the past for Nick, as things have changed a ton. Before we get into the podcast, I need to talk about smoking. I love it, and it's something I want everyone to start to do. And when I say smoking, I'm talking about smoking meat on a Traeger grill. Traeger gave me a grill. I use it about 20 hours a week, and I know that's way too much, but the food tastes so good, and it's always fun to ask if someone wants to sample your hot meat. Enough about smoking. Now I want to ask you to do a few things for me. First, follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement. Second, tell a friend or two about the podcast. Post about it, tag me and shit. Whatever you can do to help get the word out. It's greatly appreciated. And finally, I want to thank my sponsors. They are Evo, Stanley, Spy Optic, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Now, let's talk to Nick Martini. You're coming from the wedding of Tom Wallisch, Tommy Walnuts.
That's the truth, yeah. It's good to see Wally.
How was the wedding of Wallisch? Was it a big family reunion with a ton of people that you haven't seen in a while?
Yeah, it was actually insane, to be honest. It was awesome. It was like walking into a high school reunion. It's like all the people I grew up skiing with and hanging with, and everyone's diverted in so many ways. It was great to see everyone back in one place. It was a good crew to get together.
Who did you spend the majority of your time with?
I was with Wallisch. Well, not as much as I'd like. As you could imagine on someone's wedding day, they aren't as available as you'd hope. So I hung with Wallisch a bit, and with Kyle Decker a bunch, film aficionado from the ski world, and then Tom Yaps, Wallisch's agent, who's also my agent during my ski days. I hung out with those guys a bunch, and it was epic, man. It was super fun.
Yeah, it's always great to get the gang back together. And you're getting back together from a time when I knew you, and you were known for making underground ski movies every year in skiing until they became more mainstream. But a lot has changed since then. Back then, you were in Colorado. Where do you live now?
I'm down in Los Angeles, yeah, living in California, beach boy in it a bit. Changed the scenery, but it's been great. It's been super fun to get back towards the ocean after being landlocked for a long time. I grew up in Boston, right on the water, and after spending, I don't know, it must have been 8 or 9 years in Colorado, being down near the water again is great. We sort of had a bunch of the Stept crew migrate down there as well, so it's pretty much all the same crew from Boulder and Breckenridge, all now living down in California. It's been good.
That crew back then, it was all about making movies, putting your life pretty much on the line at all times when you were filming, and having a really good time pushing the envelope there. Nowadays, it's making movies, and what do you guys do to replace the other shit you were doing?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, it's still a lot about filmmaking, and it's a very oddly similar creative process, which is equally as fulfilling. It's obviously a transition into a different genre of filmmaking in some sorts, but outside of the film scene, like you're saying, in Colorado, we spend so much time skiing and almost killing ourselves. Nowadays, we've been still getting outdoors a ton. I've been surfing a bunch, which has been great. It's like the new challenge. Still been skiing a little bit in the winters, which has been fun. And the rest of the boys are doing all sorts of shit. I mean, Cam Riley's now picked up dirt biking. He's actually competing in dirt bike racing, which is, in my opinion, insane.
Really insane.
Yeah, super crazy to, like, in your late 20s, early 30s, pick up a sport that gnarly, which is crazy. So he's been having a lot of fun doing that. And honestly, a lot of the guys are still skiing a bunch in the winter. We have our second office up in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where my business partner and brothers live in. So I've been up in Jackson a bunch, and Mammoth is close by. So in the winter, we try to get up to the mountains as much as we can. My knees are pretty bad these days, so I haven't been skiing as much, but I'm still getting up there to shoot and hang, which has been fun to still play in the mountains. And other than that, hanging in the ocean and surfing and keeping it alive.
Okay, and back then it was all about Stept Productions. And that was the ski movie company. It seemed like a core group of dudes who had the same vision, and for a long time, 10 years-ish, you made videos. Today, it's Stept Studios. So still the Stept name, but why the whole change of business?
When we started making feature-length ski films, which is such an amazing experience for, God, I think it was 12 or 13 years in a row we did an annual film since we were in high school all the way through college. So many years after college is amazing. And when we saw sort of the shift in the digital marketplace going from a little bit less focus on like the feature-length sports films to more short-form content and commercial content, we tried to rebrand a little bit and pivot to Stept Studios, which still does a lot of the same things. And it's still all the same people behind the company, but the focus has shifted a little bit more to commercial production, branded content, mostly in the short form world. But in addition to film production, we now have expanded our scope of services and work to creative direction, design, copywriting, digital strategy, and a lot of post-production as well. So a lot of the clients we work with, whether they're brands or filmmakers, whoever they may be, while we do a lot of film production, we also do a lot of photography and post-production, all these other things. It's just become like a bigger set of services, which has been really fun too for us to creep into some new worlds. And yeah, it's been great.
So back then it seemed like a core of like 6 or 7 guys. With Stept Studios, I believe it's a bigger enterprise. How many people work within the Stept name today?
Yeah, it's changed and grown a bunch, and all for the best. It's been great. My brother Alex Martini and Cam Riley were the founding partners, the three of us, and another 4, 5, 6 of the old friends have come with us down to LA to expand the company. And then it started the 3 of us, the 5 of us, and now it's 35 in our LA office full time. And then my brother runs a small office in Jackson Hole as well that does some of the back end of the company with 3 or 4 guys as well. So somewhere in the 30 to 40 range. It's always shape shifting, but it's definitely become a much larger organization. It's been really fun.
That's crazy that you have 40 people, because you're the top of this pyramid, I believe. You, Cam, and your brother who founded this thing. And are you the CEO of Stept?
Yeah, that's sort of like the official title that we try to avoid, not to sound too like corporate, but yeah, I'm acting CEO. My brother's CFO. We all wear a lot of hats still, even with as many people in the organization as there is. I still direct and I do some creative direction and still have a hand in actually creating some of the films. But when we started the business, Cam, my brother, and I were making all the films ourselves. And today, Stept has 11 directors.
Oh.
And we're doing almost 200 productions a year. So every month we're doing 15 to 20 films somewhere in the world. So it's doing a lot more dynamic, and for better or for worse, we're a bit more hands off. I personally maybe do 5, 6 films a year, a couple a quarter, but really there's so many different creative savants who are now out there doing the thing and crushing it. So it's been fun to see it grow and keep the reins together and keep it rolling.
You have the office. Are people getting benefits and it's like a full-on company?
Yeah, it's a full deal, like 9 to 5. We got like 30 full-time, but sometimes there's another 30 contractors in there. So on our busy times, we almost have 60 people in the office, and it's a trip, man. It's like a whole different thing. It's been fun to watch it grow sort of organically. And yeah, it's right. Our office in LA is a fun spot. We like an indoor half pipe and like the whole vibe. It's a cool spot right next to the airport down by the beach. And yeah, we got a good crew.
Is there a ton of pressure on you making sure that you can meet payroll and you're generating new business and things that you didn't really think about when you were making the ski movies back in the day and dirtbagging it?
Absolutely. It's a whole different thing, especially with that many people. It's a lot of pressure and the overhead always grows, but it's still the same spirit of very creative young individuals. We like to say that most of our company is extremely young, and then they're shepherded by some very senior leadership. So we have 5 or 6 department heads who come from big blue chip brands like the Twitters and HBOs of the world, our head of production and head of sales. And then most of the company is super young. They're right out of college. They're cool kids who are like skiers, skateboarders, surfers, who like are really creative humans. So it's a really fun vibe. It's awesome. But as we grow, the pressure's still on, but also the market for digital content is just exploding. So it's a healthy business. It's grown a bunch, and we still are fortunate that we get to play in a lot of the same spaces. Like we're still doing ski commercials and outdoor adventure films, and I'd say over 50% of our work is still in the outdoor adventure athletic space.
Who is the most unexpected person that you have worked with?
We've been fortunate enough to do a lot of athletic stuff. We did Peyton Manning, Gatorade commercial, Steph Curry, Under Armour commercial, Patrick Mahomes, NFL commercial.
Are you on site for all these?
Yes, those I just mentioned I was. Although I'm probably personally only on site for like 15% of the work we do these days, but those ones in particular I was, yeah. And I'd say those are like the cool guys. It's like the athletic people. We get looped into the sports shit a lot. So that's been super fun to like branch out of just the snow sports and get into like the bigger athletic game, which has been rad. And obviously like those are big names. They're sweet to work with. It's awesome.
Yeah, and you've worked with a ton of big names in the ski and snowboard world. But when you drop names like Manning, Mahomes, different caliber athletes, is it a different animal than when you're working with Simon Dumont compared to when you're working with Peyton Manning?
Honestly, it's a lot of the same vibe. Like everyone has their quirks, and some snow people are super easy to work with. Some are a pain in the ass. Same deal with like the NFL and NBA guys. Patrick Mahomes is a great example of like one of the nicest people I've ever met. Same on like the golf side. We've been working with Bubba Watson a lot. He's a great guy. It's just hit or miss, like some people are super rad. Some people are a little more finicky to collaborate with, but at the end of the day, it's all the same shit. And the snow guys are the same way. And we're still doing a lot of snow stuff. We're producing a 2-year film with Henrik Harlow right now.
Nice.
Which we're really excited about. Henrik was one of the first people I ever skied with when I was 15 in Sweden. And he came and lived with my brother and I in Boulder for a while. And I think he was like legitimately one of the first professional skiers I ever met in middle school or early high school. And we've stayed close friends forever. And now a decade later, he came to us like looking for some assistance with his new film. And it's amazing to get to work with him again, like the oldest friend of all time. And last year we did a bunch of stuff with Bobby Brown. So although it's not like a huge part of our business, we still are playing in the snow space a bunch, which is rad to get to work with old friends because it's really close friends who we work with in the snow world. And it's super fun.
And you guys know every little detail of working in the snow world, too, because you've done it on shoestring budgets, you've done it on bigger budgets, and you just know how to make it happen. And you guys are those guys that are never going to say no. You're going to do whatever's asked of you to make sure that you get the shot, which was what I always respected about you guys, is you guys never stopped. So it sounds like you're doing really well now and you're crushing it, and that's pretty interesting. But we're going to take it back to before you were crushing it. You grew up outside of Boston in Winchester, Massachusetts. Is that pretty much a commuter city from Boston?
Yeah, Winchester is just a couple miles north of the city, and it's crazy. Like almost everybody I ever collaborated with somehow grew up near Boston, and especially in the snow world, which is so crazy. I remember growing up, and a lot of the guys I literally grew up with as kids, we still work with. It's like the Brady Perrons and Phil Casabon, and so many good East Coast guys, Cam Riley, and everybody. It was like the whole East Coast contingency rolled super deep. And even before our generation, Colby West and Tanner Rainvilles, and there was such a strong core ski community that inspired us. I remember growing up watching films, the Meathead films and Wicked and all these amazing film productions on the East Coast that inspired us to pick up a camera and start making films. So I got a ton of love for the East Coast, and that was where our heritage came from. And it's also where like the street skiing side of things came from. Like we don't have big mountains or powder or any of that shit. Like we were just trying to slide down rails and do whatever we could to try to move the needle and create film shots that would hopefully impress people. And still to this day, like most of the people we collaborate with or the people we grew up with are from that little tiny area in New England. So it was a special place to grow up, and yeah, we loved it.
Anybody from the East Coast seems to have a chip on their shoulder, and it's also at the same time a fraternity, because it seemed like it was hard to come up from the East Coast because all the attention from magazines and videos came from the West Coast, except for the Meathead guys, so things were changing there. But before you even get into it, I don't think life is too difficult for you growing up. Your dad owns a construction company, does really well. Then he also has a company that rents out heavy machinery. Was life for you and your brother all about whatever opportunities you wanted to take up your parents could make happen?
I like it, man. You've done your research. Yeah, absolutely. My folks were the most supportive people of all time, and they did super well, and they tried their best to keep us humble, and they're a big inspiration. They're still involved in our business heavily. Like my dad ran a family-owned business. He's helped coach us through how to run our own business. Alex, Cam, and I just started a separate business in California, Vault Rentals, that does camera rentals for commercial production, which has been a huge addition to like our portfolio of work. And that was all inspired from my dad's construction rental company. And they've been awesome. And growing up, they were just so supportive. They never sold us. They never did any of that shit. And they just wanted us to have fun and play in the mountains and helped us out with a couple cameras growing up. And I remember specifically trying to get our hands on good cameras, and my dad wouldn't pay for shit. He was like, no, you guys got to earn that shit yourself. They're just supportive, and especially for so untraditional, like coming up in the East Coast with like the waspy Boston, New York scene, and then seeing your kids make urban ski films and just be breaking into people's property and more or less be like full-time delinquents.
Yep.
They were always so proud and supportive, which I really respected. My dad would give out urban ski DVDs to his business consultant friends in Boston. And they were like, what the fuck is this? And he was always so proud. And I even remember being a kid and be like, Dad, you realize this is like some sort of weird shit. Like we're breaking and entering and jumping off people's roofs. And he was like, no, this is amazing. You guys are groundbreaking. You guys are like moving the needle. I respected my parents so much for like embracing what we did, even though it was wildly untraditional. You know, they want us to ski race. They want us to do all this like really traditional Olympic focused stuff. And we deviated heavily, and they're always behind us and support us. So I just really appreciated that. And I think all our friends, folks, were the same way. They just wanted to see us do whatever we were passionate about and like have fun and be kids and be reckless and be dumb. And it's sweet. It was awesome.
And Cannon Mountain was the mountain that they took you to when you were going skiing. And it was at the whole, like you're in a car 6 hours every weekend and that's all you wanted to do?
Yeah, it was awesome, man. Like Cannon's a couple hours north of Boston. It's known as the most hardcore mountain in New Hampshire. It's always on the weekends like -20 and solid ice. And we cut our chops there. It was like, that's where we all made it happen. We grew up ski racing really competitively.
Were you good?
Yeah, I had a lot of success early. I won the state championships and had a ton of success early. And I think we pissed a lot of people off when we quit. When you hit your teenage years and you start watching Tanner Hall and like all these people, we were like, fuck ski racing. And we all just got over to the dark side, which I think was sort of a letdown for like a lot of the people who brought us up skiing. But for us, we knew it was just the future of what we wanted to do. And luckily, all those same people who might have been disappointed equally embraced us with that transition and were proud of us. And then it was just off to the races and shit started taking off and it was super fun. And those are the years, you know, when you're like 14, 15, where you sort of want to be a delinquent and you're trying pot and being a crazy kid.
Yeah.
It's like, it was super fun. It was sick. Like, those were my favorite years for sure. When we quit racing and started jumping off roofs and like we formed our little tribe, like our cult, you know, it was me, Cam, Alex, Brady Perron, like Phil Casabon. I remember when I was 14 skiing with him in Quebec and like breaking in people's roofs and jumping on rails and shit. It was awesome. And I'm still friends with all those people to this day. So like those were the formative years, the 13, 14, 15 years old where everyone just wants to deviate and be a crazy little fuck. It was awesome.
Do you have a video camera at that point? Is that when you start filming or are you doing that when you're racing?
Yeah. I mean, the first film we ever made, I think I was 12 years old. My brother was 14. It's called Stept the Movie by Martini Brothers Productions. And that was the first one we ever made. And a third of it was skiing. Most of it was us skateboarding and jumping into bushes. We were trying to like emulate the Jackass scene.
That was what was on fire then.
Exactly. And we just fell in love with it. And we were like, making films fucking rules. And it was the whole skateboard film culture. We were just hooked on those movies, like the CKY movies. And you just see these groups of friends making films and doing crazy shit. And we just fell in love with it. And that's like sparked the fire to just like get on the film grind and start slowly doing it.
Now it is time for me to take a sponsor break. And my first sponsor is Evo. And they have supported me since day one. And I've shopped there since the day they opened their doors. The reason is they have all the great brands, the most knowledgeable and approachable staff, and they know what they're doing when it comes to boot fits, ski and snowboard tunes. They're really good at service. And when I don't feel like leaving the house, I get my stuff through evo.com. They have the same deals, but with free shipping on orders over $50, a no-hassle return policy, and a low price guarantee. And for listening to the show, I've got a new deal from Evo for you on all Evo branded products. They make some amazing stuff. I've been using their ski poles that are just as good as my $100 poles, but I paid a fraction of the price for them, and their offering is a whole lot more than just ski poles. When you head over to evo.com and check out, enter the code POWEL20, that's all one word and the number 20, no spaces, and you'll get 20% off of all Evo branded products. And when you do it, because Evo is made of good and inclusive people, they're going to give an additional 2% of all branded sales to local youth organizations. They're helping you have fun and making a difference in the community. Next up, it's Stanley. They are the brand that invented the keep things hot and cold category back in 1913, and they are located down the street from my house in Seattle. You remember Stanley from that green bottle that kept your grandpa's coffee hot all day long. They still do that, and so much more. When I think about Stanley, it's all about water bottles and pint glasses. The water bottle is a simple classic Stanley style that keeps my water cold for a couple more hours than whatever you put your water in. The pint glass keeps my beer ice cold way longer than I need it to, and the beveled edge makes me hydrate faster for some reason. It just feels good, and you're going to want to feel good too. To do that, head on over to stanley-pmi.com, go shopping, and you will get 30% off your entire order when you use the code TPM30. That's all one word, the number 30. When you check out, you'll get that 30% off. Everything you buy helps support the show, so please do that. Now we're going to jump back into the podcast. When you're a kid, not even when you're a kid, I think your whole life, one thing that goes on with you is you have like a skin condition where I think the pigment on your hands and your arms are a little bit different. Is that something that ever bothers you growing up? I'm sure at this point it is what it is and I don't give a fuck, but back then, is it something that bothered you?
Yeah, I think growing up is weird. It's called vitiligo, and it's basically where you can't get tan. Like you lose pigment in your skin. And it's actually the condition Michael Jackson had. And that's what motivated him to bleach his whole skin, which is crazy because as an African American, it's much more noticeable. Whereas someone with Caucasian skin, it's a little bit less noticeable. But I think as a young kid, I felt weird. My hands and like a bunch of my body was almost albino looking and like patchy. But it never really threw me off that bad. And then now I think that shit's like cool. I don't know. Like I think there's like Victoria's Secret models of that shit that's like a thing, but no, it was never really like a hindrance. And I think I was lucky that no one really like bullied me or anything like that. It is what it is. It's a unique thing. And now I guess like as an adult, people in 2019 are like, oh, that's so cool and unique. I'm like, I don't fucking know. But it was never like a big hindrance. And I'm glad it wasn't because I could see that being as like a kid, like getting bullied or made fun of. And I think I was lucky where even our whole crew, and again, it was like Cam and Alex and all these kids I grew up with, we were so tight-knit that we were bulletproof. You know, like we had our squad and no one fucked with us and we just did our thing. So it was all good.
Did you do any other sports or was it just skiing for you?
I played soccer a lot growing up, a lot of tennis too. Up at Cannon, Bodie Miller grew up there and he has a tennis camp and his family and my family became sort of close in the sense that there's a big tennis community in the summer, a big ski community in the winter. So I played tennis a lot and I liked all sports, honestly. Like I even played football for a little bit. I did all types of shit, but I just loved being active and getting out there. But skiing for almost my whole life was the big passion. And I think it was partly the setting, the community. There's so many people in that part of the world. Chris Logan and Parker White and Dale Talkington and like all these kids in New England. Is countless people. John Strenio, Dylan Ferguson, Mike Clark. Is this whole contingency of people we were surrounded by and insulated that were so passionate about skiing that was really the main focus always.
You're still really young through what we're talking about. And when it's time for you to go to high school, you end up moving to New Hampshire full-time and going to Holderness and skiing at Waterville Valley. Holderness is one of those elite boarding schools. I think it costs like $60,000 a year. What's it like to go to school at a place like that?
It was amazing. My family, as you said, did well. And I was at some weird school in Massachusetts with a bunch of pricks. And my brother was actually the catalyst. He had heard about Holderness. He knew Chris Davenport went there and a bunch of skiers. And my older brother was like, I want to go to this place up in New Hampshire. I'd never even heard of it. And he went to school there for 1 year and came back. And that's how we met Cam Riley, their freshman year. Cam went there as well from Beverly. He went up there and Al came back and was like, this is the shit. We ski 7 days a week. We don't live in Boston. We live literally right next to the ski resort. We ski 7 days a week. The school endorses it. They promote it. They had a bunch of U.S. ski team racers there. They just started their freestyle program, working with Waterville Academy. And at the time, Waterville Academy had all of my idols, like young idols, Andrew Hathaway, Mike Clark, LJ Strenio, Tucker Perkins. It was like this whole crew of like the young up and coming epic skiers. And we found out you go to the school and they'd only go to school to noon every day and then just ski. It was fucking crazy. And they make you go to school on Saturdays because you go to school for such a short time so you can ski all the time. So it was like a winter sports school. But once I found out about it, I was like, yeah, that's where I need to be. So we ended up going up there, and the next couple of years were epic. I mean, they were super flexible. I remember my senior year at Holderness, they actually let me go live in Boulder for a couple months. My brother was in college and just hang out at college and ski and compete, like do the US Open and do tour and everything. And they're just really flexible, and they promote winter athletes a ton. And I know in the West Coast, they have some shit like that, like the winter sports school in Utah and everything that I think Tanner Hall went to and everything. But on the East Coast, I had never even heard of anything like that. And as soon as someone told me about the school, I just knew it was like the place I needed to be, and somehow convinced the folks to send me up there, and we were off to the races.
And you're 14, 15 years old, and you're pretty much like a college kid at this point. I mean, you go to a school away from your family, and I would think that a lot of shit goes down there because there's no parents, and while there's probably someone that's supposed to watch over you, you guys are kids that are going to make some fun shit happen. And was there a lot of drinking, smoking, partying, and stupid pranks that went on?
100%. It was absolute mayhem. Absolutely. I mean, in some ways, you're very controlled because you're living on a campus with people watching you. But at the same time, there are no parents. Like, you don't see your parents for months at a time. So we're all in some ways delinquents to some degree in like a fun way. Like, high school is supposed to be that. My friends back home were into complete debauchery. And I think we were on the same tip, even though we were in like a private campus of sorts. And unfortunately, like a lot of my very close friends got kicked out of school, but we made it through. We slipped through the cracks, which is great. But we also respected, like, you got to know how to navigate the space. You can't be too egregious. You just got to somehow slip through the cracks and have fun. And that's what high school is all about. I think anybody in high school anywhere is having a shitload of fun. And we were doing the same. The great thing about that school, they let us travel all the time. I remember going to Sweden to ski with Henrik, being in Colorado to compete. Most of the winter I wasn't even at school. We were traveling on the road, like having a blast, and things definitely got pretty loose in a good way, as any fun high school kid should.
Do they send you to Switzerland and stuff with coaches? Because I think it's one of those places where it's not like you're just going and free skiing, like there is coaching involved.
Yeah, it was interesting because we at Holderness at the time, I don't know if it's still this way, they didn't have a freestyle program, so they sent us with Waterville Academy, which is right next door. So any of the race kids would go with Holderness coaches. Any of the freestyle kids, like me, Cam, and Alex, would just leave the school program altogether and go with the Waterville Academy crew. It's like a partnership. And the staff there is still to this day has become very close friends. Those are people who are rad, and they came from the same background as us as kids. So they gave us a lot of freedom and let us have a lot of fun. And it was like the dream school to go to. And I know Cam ended up getting kicked out right before graduation and had a bunch of beef with the staff. And me personally, I just tried to be amicable with everybody and fly under the radar and have a shit ton of fun. And I loved it. I had a great time.
And what is the worst thing that you've seen someone do back then when they were 15 and just privileged and stupid?
I don't know. I'm trying to think like what some of the craziest shit is, like trying to give you some meat here. I remember there was certain nights where like we were leaving for a trip once, heading to some ski trip. And the biggest thing was girls and guys' dorms are separate. And you couldn't intermingle. You get expelled immediately if you ever like cross lines or whatever. I remember one time going over to pick somebody up at like 4 a.m., to catch an early flight in Boston or something. I walk into the store and there's like 10 girls there, which is like everyone would immediately get expelled. Everyone's on mushrooms. Everyone's drunk as shit. And these kids are like 15 years old. Like, and at the time, I didn't even know that shit was going on. I'm like, holy shit. But again, it's high school in general. People get loose. People have fun. And it is what it is. And some people make it out alive. Some people get reprimanded. And it is what it is. But we always had a lot of fun. It was good.
But you were always a little different than I feel like most people, because behind the scenes then, I mean, you're making movies every year at this point. and you're 15 years old running a production company and you're working on every aspect of the back end. And while it wasn't what it is today, you were building a crew, and you kind of did that in a professional way where you were reaching out to people saying, hey, I'm Nick Martini of Stept Productions, and I've seen you ski, and I would love to have you film a full section with me.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, my mom always talks about somehow, I don't know if it was on purpose or it was just organic. We were always so business oriented because, like, at those times, like you're saying, we were 15 years old, and we had a website with an e-commerce platform selling DVDs and clothing internationally, which now I think back at it, it was like such a crazy thing to do in general.
There's brands that still can't do it right today.
Yeah, it was nuts, man. Like, we were doing distribution of DVDs globally, and we had distributors. And our junior year in high school, we got distribution from Vass or The Orchard or somebody. We're doing like international DVD sales as 16-year-olds in high school, and running a clothing line that corresponded with the films we were making, and doing DVD sales and partnering with athletes all over the world. A lot of European athletes who would come to shoot with us. By the time we were in high school, we had like no fucking idea what was going on. So at the time, it seemed very organic and natural, but now looking back at it, it is almost bizarre that we're that passionate about the business side of things that young. I like to think that's translated into like the momentum we still have going.
That's why you're where you are today, is that you've always taken it seriously. It's always been a business-like approach, regardless of the fun you were having on the side. The skiing and the making movies was always a business. That attitude, you've always had it. Whenever I worked with you, it was like that, where not everybody in your crew was like that, but you were always the dude that had your shit on point and you knew exactly what was going on. And for 15-year-old, ridiculous. It's a time when people are selling DVDs, because later on in your career, no one's buying DVDs because no one even has a DVD player. But how much money are you making in the third to sixth step movie when you're cashing in on DVD sales?
Looking back at it, I feel like it's super wise. At the time, we didn't really know what we were doing, but Cam, my brother, and I never took a payment or any distribution of funds at all, even till the end of when we were in school in Boulder. After our 9th film, we had never taken $1 out of the company. All the money that came in, whether it's from DVD sales or brand sponsorships or whatever it was just reinvested in the business. So there was definitely some net profit that was made, but it was always just put back in.
I guess a better way to ask would be, how many DVDs are you selling in the peak of DVD sales?
It's a good question. I'm trying to remember. It's been a while since we did DVDs. I think at some point we're up to a couple thousand a year. Nothing crazy.
Yep.
You know, I remember like I became good friends with Todd Jones and Johnny Cesare and the Matchstick Poor Boys, TGR guys. And I think at some point, and I don't want to misquote this, maybe I'm crazy, I think they were doing like 10, 15,000, 20,000 DVDs was a benchmark of some of the bigger action sports guys.
Yep.
I think we maybe hit 3,000-4,000 at one point, but we're also much more niche focus. You know, we're like the hardcore East Coast and then transition to Colorado, but still like the street kids. It was a different thing. It was a very core community, but at the same time, that came with a lot of other sales of T-shirts and all the hoodies and the hats and shit. Like, the people who liked Stept stuff when we were doing it loved it.
When you're spending your parents' money, yeah, they really love the Stept stuff. Because I feel like your audience was definitely a younger skewing audience than the TGRs, but you eventually worked with them and were able to take their audience and bring them in a little to you. But in your school career, it's 2005, you get a migraine one day and you head to the school nurse and you find out that you have a tumor or something that has to be removed. What the fuck's that all about?
How do you know this shit? This is awesome. Yeah, I had a super, super bizarre situation where I did have a migraine and I went to the school nurse and I was trying to get out of soccer practice and she took my blood pressure and it was like 195 over 110, which is like lethal.
Okay.
And I was a super young kid at the time and I'd never really had like a physical ailment or anything. And the nurse's face pretty much went white. And in the nicest way, to try to not freak me out, she more or less told me that I shouldn't really be alive and I need to get rushed to the emergency room right away.
Whoa.
And I felt normal. You know, I'd been this way like for fucking years. And It turns out after a bunch of scans, they found I had a large tumor in my abdominal region. It was called a pheochromocytoma, which is very, very rare. And anyone who I've ever met who went to medical school is super impressed because I'm like the anomaly guy. And luckily it was benign. It wasn't cancerous or anything. And it was secreting epinephrine that raised my blood pressure a ton, gave me migraines. It was really bad for me. And luckily they identified where it was. They took it out. But at the time, there's like a short stint where I was at Holderness where I had like this freak thing where like I could actually die. It was like super fucked up to be that young.
Yeah.
And it's almost like getting diagnosed with cancer or something when you're like 15 and you don't really know what's happening. And it was really traumatic. It was a crazy thing. And luckily they took it out. Surgery went great. It was a 12-hour surgery.
Whoa.
As he cut through all my abs. It was a really gnarly thing. And luckily it all panned out okay. And I had to get checked up like 3-4 years after that quarterly, but there's like no long-term repercussions other than I have like a little bit of high blood pressure still. But yeah, I got super lucky, super terrified, and made it out okay.
Does it light a fire under your ass? Like every day you're going to live like your last, you're going to learn new tricks every day, and you're just going to be a super version of yourself at that point?
Yeah, honestly, I think it did, all like jokes and cheesy shit aside, it did change my mentality fairly significantly as a young person of like, life is good. Appreciate this shit. Like it could go south at any point, which is great. And unfortunately, that was also the beginning of a very long string of traumatic injuries, mainly from athletics, like orthopedic shit. But that was like the first big event. And then it slowly snowballed from there.
Well, let's not talk about your injuries just yet. We'll get to some glory first. 2007. You're 16 years old. It's the first year of the Salomon Jib Academy. And first, what is the Salomon Jib Academy?
The Jib Academy was this event. It was like a talent search that Salomon put on, which I still think is one of the coolest things that happened in skiing. I hope more brands will emulate that moving forwards. And I think there's some similar events in surf and skate that's brands putting on demos or events where Salomon, for instance, would go to 3 to 5 resorts a year, bring their whole pro team, which at the time was the Simon Dumonts and Sammy Carlsons and all these people. They'd roll into a little ski town and they'd have an open format event. The goal was whoever won the event would get an opportunity to be a part of Salomon to some degree. You know, go to like a mammoth session with the pros, like maybe get a sponsorship.
Yep.
That was like TBD. But because of the pro talent that was attached and because of some of the success stories, it became a coveted thing. And it was short-lived. It was only a couple of years. But I remember they were going to do one at Waterville. And I was so damn hyped because at the time, Salomon had the best team by far. Like in terms of hard goods, they had every A-list athlete. It was like the whole team. I think K2 as well.
I was like, it's arguable that Seth, Pep, Pettit, but K2 is never going to podium.
Yeah, and K2 is more like the big mountain. Like Seth, like these were people I idolized. It was just like a different thing. Like Salomon had a bunch of the park and pipe up and coming kids. So for me as like an East Coaster, I was like, Salomon's the dudes. You know, like these are the kids in the fucking park. That's who I want to be like. And I got super excited and ended up doing well at the event and winning an opportunity to go to Mammoth. And that's when I linked with the whole Salomon crew, like Jenny Naftalin, who's now Jenny Taylor, Derek Taylor's wife. And we became super close. And that's when I got my first real sponsorship. And I think part of the event was that I got to go to Sweden to compete in the Stockholm Big Air. And that's when I got to hang with like Henrik and a bunch of kids as well in Stockholm. But that was like my first foray, like the first big opportunity I got to like link with a real brand, get an endorsement, get a sponsorship. And then they were the catalyst to letting me like travel and ski professionally.
When you meet Henrik and guys like that in Stockholm, do they already know who you are based on your internet persona and the videos that you're putting out already? Because you were early on in online content. You've already made 5 movies, and are they aware of that yet?
Yeah, I think I met Yoon Olsen there for the first time. Like all those guys, they sort of like knew, which was crazy because we were literally just like this rogue crew from New England. But I think at that point, like newschoolers.com was a big catalyst for like the digital era before traditional social media platforms now, like the Instagrams of the world. At the time, Newschoolers really was social media before those platforms came about. So I think even the really successful skiers like the Yoon Olsens of the world were on those platforms watching what was going on.
Yeah.
So I think the ski community is small enough and tight-knit enough that if anyone was doing cool shit, you sort of knew about it. So to go somewhere like that, it was an honor, honestly, like to show up in Stockholm as a 15, 16-year-old kid and have like the Yoon Olsens of the world know about what Stept was doing, or like the kids on the East Coast. But we're also shepherded by the older generation of the East Coast, like the Rainvilles and the Colby West and all those people who like were 5 years older than us who were championing us as well.
But totally different generation, totally different lifestyle than those guys lived than what you guys did for sure. Because yeah, while there's some urban mixed in there, those guys were never doing the gnarly urban stuff that you were doing, and you guys were not the rock stars that they were.
Absolutely. It was a whole different vibe. We were like the young, scrappy kids, and those people support us so much. I've never met any of those people who were mean or like protective or like jaded in any way. Everybody has always been so damn nice. Like I was always almost surprised when you meet someone who's like a god, like a Yoon Olsen or a Seth Morrison, or these people who like, I grew up literally worshiping the Tanner Halls of the world, watching so many movies, like Happy Days. I remember I watched probably 400 times. And then meeting like those people. I remember the first time I met Tanner Hall, he was just the nicest dude of all time. And now like 12 years later, I've hung out with Tanner probably 700 times and had debauchery and all types of fucked up shit. Yeah. But like the first time meeting him at like 16, they're just nice humans, man. It's like, I respect that so much. And I hope people can take that as like a lesson for the next generation of pioneers and people who are legends, that they should act that way too. Because I just respected that so much. I was really impressed how nice everyone was.
Yeah, there's something to be said for being cool.
For sure.
It's time for me to take my last sponsor break, and the brand I want to talk about is Spy Optic. They're a brand that I'm so happy to have involved with the show because not only do they have an incredible collection of sunglasses, but it's time to think winter, and Spy has been supporting all things snow since they started 25 years ago. Now, they have rad signature collections, game-changing technologies. The Ace EC really is game-changing. 3 lenses built into one, it's future shit. And all their goggles have the Happy Lens, which really sets Spy apart from everyone else. And that's a big reason why you should be wearing Spy. The biggest reason to me that you should wear them is that Spy's goggles look better than everyone else's. I always think the other brands will catch up and fit and finish, but they don't. Spy's look better and you will look better wearing them. For listening to the podcast, I'm going to make it easier than ever for you to get a pair of Spy sunglasses or goggles. All you need to do is head over to spyoptic.com, do your shopping, and when you check out, you'll get 20% off when you enter the code TPM, the number 20, all one word, and you're done. You're supporting the show, and you're going to look better than you ever have before. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. They have been brewing my favorite Northwest beer since 2006, and they have a couple of new flavors that I'm going to tell you about. The first is Profuse Juice, a hazy IPA that kind of reminds me of Out of Office. It's got a great flavor and a percentage of sales benefit the Surfrider Foundation. The second beer, Smash, is a lighter wheat ale that I drank a ton of while I was in Bend. You can't go wrong with either of these beers, and they're great to drink outside. And 10 Barrel is all about drinking beer outside and supporting all things snow. You can find out a lot more about the company and the beer over at Fully Aligned. That's 10 Barrel's brand new podcast that lets you peek behind the curtain over at 10 Barrel. Next time you're at the store, buy some 10 Barrel and support the brand that really makes a difference in the sports we love, the 10 Barrel Brewery. Those are my sponsors. Now we are going to get back into the podcast. Things are happening for you and you're about to graduate from high school. It's time to go to college and it seems like your whole crew picks Boulder. And do you guys all talk about this and collectively make the decision like, hey, we should all go to the same ski school pretty much and party our faces off and continue to make movies?
To some degree. And unfortunately, it was honestly sort of a 50-50 split because a lot of people did end up at the University of Utah. Brady Perron, who's a good friend with a lot of like the Vermont East Coast contingency, ended up at UAU. And for some reason, a bunch of us ended up at Boulder. But we all really followed the path of my brother. Like he was the first one out there before me and Cam. And like I said, at Holderness, we had the opportunity to go out and ski and, of course, do some partying with that whole crew. And we all fell in love with Boulder. My folks, as like well-to-do East Coasters, wanted me to go to like Middlebury or they had these dreams, all this shit. And Boulder was the only school I applied to. Huh. I got in early admission in November. I was just like, fuck it. I'm going to go ski all senior year. It's great. But yeah, I think Alex sort of like set the tone for that Boulder was a mecca for skiing as well as Utah. It was like one of the two, you know?
Yep.
And once like the older brother and the crew set up shop there, it was inevitable that I was going to head that way. And I don't regret it. Boulder was probably the best 5 years of my life. I fucking loved it.
Your first year, everything starts exploding for you. You're talking about watching Poor Boys movies 400 times, but you end up getting connected with the Poor Boys. I think you're the point person for their Boston segment. Is that the first year you shoot with Poor Boys?
Yeah, it was my freshman year at Boulder. And like you said, that's when everything sort of culminated. I was out of high school. I could dictate my own schedule. And that was the winter where I got legitimate sponsors, like paid endorsements, which was a huge thing because then you have the freedom to actually like travel and ski on your own accord. And that was also the first year Johnny from Poor Boys reached out, which for me, matchstick was a big thing in my life growing up as a kid. With Ski Movie 3, some of Seth's stuff was like some of the most inspirational shit I've ever seen. But for me, really watching T and everyone in Poor Boys and Pep and like Johnny Duchesne was a legend to me.
Yep.
Those were the dudes. And when I got that call as a freshman in college, now looking back at it, it's almost like comical how epic I thought that was. And it still is, honestly. Like when you look up to somebody like that from when you're 12 years old to you're 18, like you're just consuming their shit every day. And then you get that call from the guy. You're just like, life fucking rules, you know? So like that was definitely the year where things started picking up quickly, where we got in with the Poor Boys team and competitively things started going super well. I think I got like fourth at the US Open that year, maybe, which is crazy to me even to think back like competitively. I don't even know how the fuck I pulled that off. But there's a bunch of like triggered moments of sponsorships and movie appearances and things that it transitioned from skiing sort of pseudo professionally into like actually skiing professionally, which was a big turning point.
It's a really hard thing to do for a person like yourself because when you think about skiing and being successful, you have to have a certain amount of style. And you ski a lot of handrails and also some gnarly stuff in the park, big spins, and you're like 6'4". You're a giant among midgets. You have all arms and legs that could be flailing everywhere. Is that something you constantly had to think about throughout your career, is like keep myself together and don't be all over the place?
Absolutely. I mean, that's just looking up to people, you know, like I grew up watching Tanner's interviews talking about how style is the thing. Like you got to have good style. And that was a huge priority, even from when we were little kids. Like, how can you make it look beautiful and like make it look dope? And as a huge lanky person, it's very difficult. But there's also those people who had done it well before us, you know, like the Liam Downeys of the world, who are known as style icons. I think Liam's like 6'5". So there was definitely role models ahead of us who like paved the way for that. But I would say it's a bit more of a challenge, you know, being a big dude. The style is tough, but also it comes with more potential for injury from how I see it, you know, like being a small compact person versus being a big dude spinning in the air. Yeah, it's a little more challenging, but yeah, we just made it happen.
And on the step side of things, it seems like you guys are all concerned with the gnarliest stuff in skiing. There was urban segments before you guys came around, but the level that you and your crew took it to was so much different than everybody else. There was no little stuff. There was no filler clips. That was all thrown away. Was that the group mentality, that it's not really about fun, it's more about how it looks on film, and we'll have fun doing all the shit that leads up to it?
I think for us, it was just, we wanted to catch people's eyes and be disruptive, which is still something we carry forward to the business we do today. Like, I don't think anyone's getting noticed for doing run-of-the-mill shit. And we were super young and like Gumby.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like we were very bouncy and young kids. And I think we always wanted to do things on film that would make people go, holy shit. Cam Riley is one of those people who embodied that more than any of us, where we'd be driving around looking for urban spots that were 10, 15 feet off the ground. And he would look at something 30 feet off the ground and be like, I'm going to slide that round and jump off that shit.
Yeah.
And even us, we were like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, it was nuts. And it paid dividends. You know, like people watched the films and they were legitimately in awe to some degree of maybe not even impressed by the athletics, but more in awe of like, how would someone do that? But regardless, it was eye-catching and disruptive, and I think it caught a lot of people's eyes, and that sort of helped put us on the map.
Yeah, and your format, it has to be a lot different than what everybody else is doing. I mean, you guys film from probably 11 to 5 in the morning, and you can get arrested doing what you're doing where everybody else has jumps being built for them. What's the sketchiest situation you've ever been put in where you're in a terrible part of town and you're dude skiing?
God, I wish I had a good anecdote here. It's just too many to remember.
You ever get shit stolen from you?
I'm trying to think. We must have at some point. I mean, the amount of interactions we have with police has still probably affected my life to this day, where most nights in the winter, we were getting the police called on us for almost 10 years. So the amount of cop interactions I've had and all the crews had in our lives is in the hundreds, if not thousands. I grew up dealing with police a lot. And we also looked like complete psychos. Like we were in face masks and tall tees up on people's buildings. A lot of times they thought we were like doing armed robbery or something, you know? Like when they found out we were skiing, they were sort of relieved. But it changed my whole mentality about law enforcement in general. And I think to the better, like I spent so much time debating with police, and unfortunately I was typically positioned as the front man. Like when the cops would show up, like, all right, Nick, go deal with it.
You're the business guy, dude.
Yeah, exactly. So I spent a lot of time in my youth just dealing with police and trying to explain that, you know, we're after this like athletic and creative pursuit, which they didn't understand or give a fuck about, which I appreciate now. Looking back at it, at the time I was so naive, I was pissed off that they were mad at us. But now looking back at it, I'm so amazed they weren't more pissed.
Right.
When you're destroying public property or like private property for that matter, like we would just fuck shit up all the time. And I'm amazed we didn't end up in jail more. I think we only got 2 or 3 times like official trespassing where we had to go to court over like hundreds and hundreds of times. And looking back at it, I don't necessarily feel bad. I'm just more surprised that people weren't more mad, you know? And at the time I was pissed that people were even mad. I was like, why is this even an issue? We're just skiing off the roof. And they're like, well, you're bashing in our wall and destroying our railings. And I could never conceive it. Now looking back, I'm like, now this makes a lot more sense to me. Like as a real adult human, like
yeah, the property damage, the weed smoking, and all the stuff that's not supposed to happen that people were frustrated with.
Like a bunch of 20-year-olds just getting high and breaking in on your roof after they like cut through your chain link fence and are jumping under your railing
and telling you that until someone comes, I'm going to keep doing this.
Yeah, or when they come, you just keep doing it. That's the thing, when the property owner would show up and tell us to fuck off or get out of there, and no one would leave. We'd just keep skiing until the police came. And then even when the police came, we'd still keep skiing sometimes. Like, all right, if you're going to arrest us, but Cam's got to get the clip. You know, like it's crazy shit. Crazy.
And a lot of people paid you to do that. You have a lot of great brands that are paying you. And I mean, we don't have to talk about dollars because I think you did well. And for a few years, you did really well. You had the North Face, which had to be a great check and a great brand. Were you ever part of their Super Bowl commercials?
No, I was not. Maybe. We did one big commercial with North Face. The year they decided to invest in Park and Pipe, and they signed 4 athletes. It was myself, Tom Wallisch, Mike Riddle, and Caitlin Farrington, the snowboarder. And they did a big TV commercial with TGR in New Zealand. And that was like probably the biggest project I've been a part of with North Face. It was actually a broadcast television commercial, which is awesome. That's when I met Todd Jones.
Also a Holderness alum.
Absolutely. Yep. And that's when I became really close with the Jones boys, and still very close to this day. And they're on a whole another level as humans. But that's when I got introduced to Todd, and he mentored me a ton and pretty much opened the books and taught me how to do real production and what it's like and how you bill and how you budget and how you make films. Johnny inspired me a ton from Poor Boys just on production, but Todd Jones was the one who really told me how to do it and like how you approach the thing. And Todd just became a super close friend of mine and still is. And it was all through that North Face stuff.
I think you have to look at the difference in the production companies is that Poor Boys, yeah, Johnny was a visionary and created the careers for a lot of people. Business acumen, maybe not as much as the Holderness graduate Todd Jones, who has taken the business of creating ski movies and crushed it. He still has just as much fun, if not more fun than anybody out there, and is still running a crazy big business, which is amazing. The next sponsor I want to talk about, you have Rockstar, which is a great check for you, and they probably support every project that's content-based that you do.
Absolutely, and those guys were so cool. They picked up me and Matt Walker. I think we might have been the first 2 like Park and Pipe skiers they signed, and they were just pumped. And they're just such a weird organization in general. Like, I remember when we signed with them, their corporate emails were craig@rockstar69.com. And they still were for almost 5 years until I think it was 2015. Their corporate website was rockstar69.com. That just tells you something about like the corporate culture.
Yeah.
Like they were insane party individuals. There's a very different vibe from like a North Face dinner and like a Rockstar dinner.
Yeah.
They take their brand name to the fullest extent. They're psychos in the best way. Like we always had a full send with those guys. And they were awesome. They also really supported everything we did and stepped and everything. Like, and that's one thing I can't thank all those brands enough. Like when I got a personal endorsement, that also came with supporting the Stepped films, which was always so appreciated.
And then to round out your sponsor list, Scott, The Kind, Breckenridge, and Ski the East. Was there anybody else I'm missing that were paying you in the heyday?
That was probably it. And then I switched up a little bit. Like went to Giro and Icelandic and a couple other guys. But that was sort of like the main fold. I'll always still give the most credit to Salomon. Jenny Taylor supported me more than anybody. And eventually we parted ways from a ski sponsorship. But she was really the catalyst for supporting my ski career.
Is it sad when you leave Salomon, or do they email you, or is it just totally heartless? How do you find out that you're not going to be a part of their program?
At the time, Salomon had almost 30 park and pipe athletes, and they slimmed down to 3. The only people left when they switched focuses to more like the side country, back country, I think the only people who stayed or were given the opportunity to stay were Bobby, Alexi, Gabu, and maybe Vincent Gagne, maybe like a couple, but some of the Frenchies or French Canadians, but it was pretty amicable. They pretty much dropped the entire team. Everyone, Simon, Sammy, me, fucking everybody. And I was such good friends with Jenny at the time that it wasn't like a hard thing. She was like, I'm sorry, I've tried everything to like keep you on the program, but it's not going to work out. And like whatever I can do to help you. I think I maybe even stayed on for like clothing for a year or something, but those type of deals were such friendships. I see a lot of people like get dropped from sponsors and go on social media and like ridicule them and stuff. And
Not smart.
It's hard for me to understand because I'm like, these are the people who supported you. You know, like,
Yeah.
I was thankful when I departed from someone. I was like, thank you guys for helping me for 10 years. I love you guys. It's not like, fuck you. It's more like, I appreciate all the support for a long time. It's rad. You know, like you guys are awesome and I can't thank you enough.
Yeah. But back to when you're on Salomon, your big year of 2009, contest-wise, I think you get the Alpha Dog Award for Best Under 18 at the Do Tour. So you're doing well in like the big spinny, flippy, crazy contests that you need doubles and eventually triples for. That doesn't really seem like your direction to me, though, because it's all about filming the gnarliest urban shit, and you're eventually going to branch out to Poor Boys and TGR. A lot of things are happening. You're super busy, and then you experience your first knee injury. That is the end of your freshman year, maybe your sophomore year, I'm not sure. But what happens? Because everything's so promising. And then, I don't know if it's a catastrophic knee injury, but I think every injury you had is pretty bad.
Yeah, that was like sort of, I don't want to say the beginning of the end, but there's also like the beginning of the beginning to some degree.
Depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, my first knee injury, I blew my ACL, was in my prime. I was at Do Tour, the first event of the year, and I was going absolutely apeshit. I was trying to do a lot of things I don't think people had done ever. I remember like the first rail, I was trying to do a rodeo 450 onto the first down rail. Insane shit, because I was just on cloud 9.
Everything was clicking skiing wise. You believed you had all that shit.
Yeah, I believe like there was an opportunity to potentially like win some of those marquee events. And unfortunately, with that level of attitude and confidence come the consequences of in that event, I ended up falling on a jump, doing a switch right 9, like in a blizzard, which every year Do Tour Prec is a blizzard. And I blew my ACL, and I remember I was with TJ Schiller, and I just didn't believe it happened. I was running up and down the hill like a psycho, just trying to convince myself that my knee was fine. And TJ was the one who pulled me aside and was just like, dude, I've been there, and you just gotta relax for a second and accept this shit. And regardless, as we all know, like that was the first ACL, and it was devastating to say the least, but it was also the catalyst for my film career in general. That was the moment that everything changed, where I got hurt in December, and I was looking at the rest of the winter as a college kid who had the winter free. I'd already left school for the winter, and I decided I was going to dedicate my year to making a film with Stept. in a much more serious way.
Is that when it becomes art compared to just capturing clips?
Yes. That was the whole difference. Where before that, I'm just filming shit just to film shit. And then I got laid up and I was like, I want to make like a real film. And that was what I would consider the first real stepped film that actually made an impact. Was Network. Was the first year I blew my knee. And I think it won some shit.
Amateur Movie of the Year at IF3.
Yeah, it won something cool. Regardless, that was the first film I took seriously of like, I'm going to actually make a film. And by the end of that winter, I had fallen in love with filmmaking almost more than skiing. I had just seen like this whole new art form, which up until that point was more about, like you're saying, just capturing clips. But when I couldn't ski and I wasn't focused on that, I took it way, way more seriously. And that was also the change of the cameras from like the VX
2000.
All that shit and like the HVX and like all the Panasonic like 5Ds with lenses that would do certain things. And I remember getting like a camera with modular lenses and learning about depth of field and shutter speed, and my whole world just opened up. And that was like the beginning of being addicted to filmmaking.
And this is where all the momentum for Stept really starts building. I think that's where I find out who you guys are. And all the dudes who are skiing in the movies are starting to get contracts. Everything's going as planned. You guys are all living a lifestyle in Boulder that I hear was pretty out of hand.
Yeah, to say the least. Everyone knows Boulder's a party college, and I think also our crew in general was susceptible to sending hard, and we had a lot of really fucked up nights. I think there was an article in Powder magazine once with Cam Riley that Rogie did. He came and stayed with us in Boulder for a bit and sort of like opened up the curtains behind some of the things, but we were, I don't want to say lucky enough, but we ended up having a house that was huge, that had 8 bedrooms, that housed about 10 or 12 of us for a long time. And it was a thing. I don't want to use the word frat, but it was pretty much like we hated frats. We were like the anti-frat of ski frats.
Right.
Like, we were like the delinquent, crazy party kids. And we got a reputation for that too, for better or for worse, which is all good. We were the people who really pushed it very hard during the day and during the night. But it was awesome, man. It was some of the most fun years of my life, and I look back at that and I wish I could do it again. I think that's like what college is all about for kids in their early 20s. Like, you should go have fun and just go ape shit. And yeah, it was loose, to say the least.
And this whole time you're traveling as well. I mean, you have sponsors. They want you filming and traveling. In about 2011 on a Poor Boys trip, you destroy yourself on a down flat down rail. And this time your injuries are internal and they could be serious. And the good news is you're hurt near a hospital, but where are you and what goes down there?
Yeah, so that particular trip was actually in Spokane, Washington. The list of injuries, if you actually look it on paper, is insane. It's like 8 orthopedic surgeries in 4 winters or 5 winters, twice a year. I was getting opened up, but that one was one of the worst. I was with Pete Alport and Cody Carter filming on a Poor Boys trip, and was on a down flat down. I was doing a front switch up to backside switch up to 270, like a bunch of spinning on this down flat down. And I caught an edge, took a stare to the stomach, and I got up and I thought, I just rallied myself, knocked the wind out of myself. And then a couple minutes later, I'm realizing I have these extremely sharp pains in my stomach, which at the time I didn't realize that that's such a serious thing. I'd gotten the shit beaten out of myself for so many years. I just sort of tried to walk it off, and then after about 10 minutes, I literally felt like my insides were exploding. And we realized there's probably something more serious. And luckily, I was literally next to a hospital where the rail was. And we walked over in my ski boots about 400 feet, walked into the emergency room with all my ski clothes on. And I think they had a stethoscope or something. And someone at the hospital realized something was seriously wrong. And I think from the time I checked in to the time I was in surgery, it was only like 8 minutes.
Whoa.
I checked in and somebody like felt my stomach and was like, oh, fuck. And I was like, what's up? And they're like, you're going in surgery, and just put a mask on me. And I had lost 2 liters of blood internally.
Whoa.
And I was just basically like spewing blood inside of my stomach. My spleen was ripped into 6 pieces.
Whoa.
And I woke up 2 hours later and they were like, well, you're alive. You no longer have a spleen and life is good. And it was sort of the second time my abs had been cut through because of my tumor in high school. So I still have 2 huge scars to the center of my chest. And yeah, made it through alive, which again, unfortunately, was like one of so many fucked up injuries.
Well, I think the next one, you get yourself healthy, and the next year is still lining up to be a big year because every year before you get hurt, you're lining up to have a huge year. You're going to film with TGR, you're going to film with Poor Boys, and you're going to be part of a Stept movie again. This time you get to go to AK with TGR. Is that something that you've always dreamed of? I mean, I know you watch the MSP movies, and I would think AK is the dream for someone who is into those movies.
You couldn't have said it better. That was the dream, like watching Seth and AK in Valdez, like my whole life. That's the dream, especially I'm with the Jones boys. Like TGR has pioneered as well as Matchstick, but like these guys have pioneered what skiing and filming is up in those mountains. When you get the call from somebody like that to go to Alaska, especially as like a street kid, like who the fuck invites an urban skier to Alaska? But again, that's back to like my close relationship with the Jones boys. I was so thankful and just wanted to deliver, and like I grew up as a skier, not like a park skier, like a ski racer, and I've skied a lot of backcountry in my life, and I was just pumped. Like I was excited to go up there and crush it for those dudes. And we went to Anchorage, I think, first to do some street stuff and in Whittier, and then ended up in Haines. I was with Ben Chetler and one other person I wish I remembered, but we were like some grade A's and I was getting giddy and I just wanted to like make an impact, and like the first time the sun goes, we're up on top of this mountain. It's not that gnarly. I don't know, it's a couple thousand vert, and I thought like the way to get a shot, on a metal spot, just to straight line it, open it up. And I think my plan was to do like half a dozen turns and then just send it. And I think I did 2 or 3 turns and just pointed it and got up a ton of speed and was cruising down this face and hit the Bergschrund, and it was like a big kick at the bottom, and I backslapped and then ended up tumbling forwards, and next thing I know, I'm like up in the snow, getting my shit together, and my shoulder's like down by my nipple.
Oh,
just destroyed. And I realized it had probably been like 30 seconds, 40 seconds before I even realized I was hurt, like the shock. And I realized my shoulder is like not even remotely close to where it's supposed to be. It's like halfway down my body.
Ugh.
So obviously I'm like, oh, fuck. So the guy takes my shirt off, tries to put it back in. I'm lying on the heli basket. And they try for half an hour to get my shoulder back in. They just can't do it.
Oh.
I was in a ton of pain, and they decide the best option is to fly back to Haines. And there's a 30-minute flight. So my shoulder's still down in the middle of nowhere. 30-minute flight, go to the Haines hospital, and it's closed on the weekends. So I get some lady in, and they strap 2 dumbbells, like 2 big athletic weights, to my arm off a table, and they're trying to pull it back into its socket for 20 minutes. And they eventually get the thing to slide back in, and that sort of end of the Haines trip, and also the start of the shoulder saga, which just continued to get worse and worse over time. But that was like the first bad shoulder one I had.
For you, especially with handrails, whenever you come off something early and you put your hand down to catch a handrail, that's like a no-no for a dude with a bad shoulder.
Yeah, and I don't know if we're going there, but then the other one, like at a certain point, both of my shoulders were so fucked that I think everything was a no-no. Like whether it was powder skiing or urban skiing or whatever it was, over time, just the knees and shoulders start to go. It's part of the game.
But you had it pretty tough in terms of every year you had some major issues and major injuries. You get yourself better from this one, and you do the other shoulder, like you say. I think there's another knee that happens at Hood in the summer. And when that shit happens, after your 6th major injury in 4 years, when you're on the ground, you realize your knee is blown. Do you think to yourself, is this even worth it? Like, I don't even know if I want to come back and ski anymore. Yeah, I'll make movies, but it's just not worth it because of the pain that I have to go through every time only to get hurt again.
I wish I had thought that, and that's probably my only regret with skiing, that I didn't stop earlier. At the time, I think it was a motivation from money, potentially from contracts when you're a young kid and you don't have any other livelihood. So you feel like this is your way to get compensated. This is what you got to do. And you don't see another way out. So you just keep going. And unfortunately, there was never a time where I thought I should stop doing this. I just kept doing it forever, forever and forever. And eventually, years later, I remember my last injury was in Japan probably 5-6 years ago, where I did my fourth ACL on my left knee. That was the moment where I finally had that thought. And at the time, we'd already had like a pretty successful production entity going. I remember finally being like, I don't know why the fuck I'm doing this. I was like, that's where I gave up. But up until then, I never really had that thought, which is crazy. Even like the third knee, the fourth shoulder, I was just so passionate about skiing, which I don't regret either, because it gives you so many opportunities too, to travel the world, to meet all these people, to have all these fun events. I didn't want to give it up. And sometimes you just keep pushing. But looking back at it, that was probably the one regret, was not stopping a little earlier. Because my body now is like really fucked up. Like really fucked up.
You're always in pain?
Not necessarily pain. It's just like with my knees, like my fourth ACL, which I have had surgeries on, I still haven't been able to fix. I've had bone work done, and I can't ski really, and I want to ski the rest of my life. Like I can go on the mountain. I still go on the mountains to film, which is great, but I can't like ski hard like I want to.
Yeah. Even
if it wasn't jumping, and I'll never be able to do that, which is a bummer. Maybe if I had stopped pushing it so hard earlier, that wouldn't have been a thing, Like, I think we all, like, if you grow up a skier, like, I want to teach my kids how to ski. I want to, like, play in the mountains my whole life, and that's becoming less realistic over time, which is a bummer.
But you have 12 videos to show your kids.
Fuck yeah. I mean, luckily enough, I don't have pain, which is rad. I can still surf and bike and cruise and make films. So, like, life is good. I have no regrets. I'm a happy camper, but I think I probably definitely did my body in a little more than I should have.
Well, you are definitely in a good place now. It's amazing to think that all of that, and then eventually you're off Salomon, you're on Icelandic, you eventually get hurt in Japan, and you're done, move to California. Now you've got a media empire. You've got 40 people working under you. That's crazy, dude. You support 40 people's families, and that's something to be proud of and scared about all at the same time. But now we're at a part in the show that I like to call inappropriate questions. And what should have been a very easy thing for me to do was to get 3 inappropriate questions for you, because I know a lot of your friends, turned out to be a lot more difficult than what I thought it was going to be. On Monday, I reached out to Clayton, and he said he would definitely do it, but he wouldn't throw you under the bus. He wasn't going to ask anything that would make you embarrassed or anything like that. And I said, Clayton, that's totally cool. I want you to ask a question that'll start a fun story. That's all that we need to do. And he says he'll do that. But then I don't hear from Clayton for like 3 days. So I talked to Shay. But Shay doesn't like being recorded. He's got a little issue with not being comfortable with that. And that's fine. There's some people like that. So I didn't record with Shay. So then I get Scotty Vermis, the little guy over at Icelandic. Awesome dude. He was your old team manager. So I was going to get him to ask you questions. But then Clayton comes back and he's like, dude, I'm so sorry. I ghosted you for 4 days. I had some shit going on. But yes, I will finally do those questions for you. And then Clayton sent me over these questions, which I have to say are some of the worst inappropriate questions that I've ever been sent. So before I ask you the inappropriate questions that Clayton sent me, I'm going to ask you a question that I came up with first. What is the dumbest thing you've ever seen Clayton Vila do?
Oh, wow. That's a good one.
I'm only asking because he would not ask you any inappropriate questions.
Well, I'm actually very proud of my friends that we run so deep that they won't fuck with me. I appreciate that. The dumbest thing I've ever seen Clayton do. Fuck. Too many things to count. God, I can't think of anything off the cuff. I wish I could. I've seen him jump off a lot of stupid shit, which I think we're all aware of. We've all seen on film.
Were you there when he cut his face?
No, I was not, although that is a fucked up story for anyone who hasn't heard that. It was in Crested Butte on the down rail that Dave Clayton had some famous shots in Level 1's movie Forward. He went to Crested Butte and did 24 hours at Urban Rails and had this really amazing segment in Berman's movie. It was awesome. Clayton went there as a teenager. I think he was like 16 during the Junior Olympics, like when you're a kid competing. And he tried to go out and hit an urban rail, and he fell, and his cheese grater stairs with the gnarly metal, and Clayton ripped off half of his face. He ripped off his entire cheek off his face.
Like Nick Cage in Face Off.
Yeah, legitimately. It's fucked up. And Clayton still has a scar up his entire face from it, which is pretty subtle. Like, you gotta look to notice it, but that's one of the gnarliest ski injuries I've ever heard of. And I think he was only 16 when it happened. But his entire face got ripped off like a big chunk. And they had to sew it back on. It's fucking gnarly.
Yeah. So I'm going to go with Clayton's first inappropriate question.
What is the trick that got away?
Oh my God. I don't know if he's referencing this in particular, but there's one that's the biggest joke in our crew, which is this really famous rail in Boulder that's probably been in 50 ski films. It's a down to flat rail, like a 20-foot down, 3-foot flat. It was in My Super Unknown and in Henrik's video parts and Liam Downey's video parts and everybody's. Above it, there's a big roof that, what is his name? The snowboarder, I think it's Pat someone, not Pat Moore. One of the snowboard kids from Boulder jumped off at once. He was a coach at Wendell's.
Pat Milbury?
Pat Milbury, yes. He has a famous photo of him jumping off this roof. And our biggest joke was we wanted to jump off the roof. And I was always saying that I was going to miss C5 off it, which is sort of like a stupid trick like no one would ever do.
Yeah.
But we'd always get drunk in college. And so I was going to miss C5 off this 35-foot roof in the middle of Boulder. And we actually went and attempted it a couple times, like trying to get snow up there, and failed. But that was the one that got away, was a stupid-ass Misty 5 off the baseline Boulder School roof, which if anyone lives in Boulder, they'll know what I'm talking about. It's like a very famous spot, but that was definitely the one that got away.
All right, now we will go with question number 2.
What is your favorite handrail trip with the boys?
Wow.
There's probably 100 of them. It's easy to pick one.
Yeah, I'd say Boston, the trip that my brother has there's a very, well, I guess there's no such thing as a famous handrail to the general public, but the Boston Bunker Hill Monument is a famous tourist destination in Boston. There's a 6-kink down rail. It's about 150-foot long rail that my brother, I don't even think he was like skiing at the time. Al sort of faded out of like skiing in our films.
Yep.
But would always talk shit and call us pussies that we couldn't do this or that. And then like once a year, he would just put on his skis and do some insane shit. And we were in Boston. Alex probably hadn't had a video part in 3 years. And he was like, you guys are pussies. You won't even hit this rail. And we're like, no one could ever do that. It's like 160-foot 6-kink. No one could fucking do this. He was making fun of us so much. He's like, I'll put on my fucking skis and do this right now. And legit, we built a little snow in run, and he got it like third try.
That's crazy.
The whole entire thing. And then I believe we got like a cease and assist from the National Park Service because it was a national monument, and we had to pay them. Like, we got sued, like they saw the film. I'm trying to remember the details. I think we had to pay him to repaint the rail, and we got like a court order and all this shit like a year later.
But your brother was able to say, see, I told you, you guys are fucking pussies, and I got it.
Yes, and Al will still to this day take pride in that we all suck and that he's way better than us at everything. He proved it. I do believe him.
So I think the third question is probably referencing that.
What is your favorite Alex Martini shot?
Is that the one?
That is definitely the one, although he has so many. For anyone who's watched all the Step movies, you'll notice every year he only has 1 or 2 shots, and they are fucking crazy. And he would just be the guy just like smoking a joint, making fun of us. And he would just put on his skis and do the craziest shit. And I got to give respect to my brother. He was probably more talented than all of us combined. And he just never wanted to participate in the scene. You know, he was like, sponsors are fucking stupid. Fuck all you guys. He got offered sponsorships and turned them down. You know, it's like crazy shit that you would never believe. But he was just that core guy. And Shay Flynn is another one of those people too. I got so much respect for Shay. He was by far one of the most talented people in our crew and would never compromise his integrity for sponsors who would say like, you know, do this post and say you love us and all this cheesy shit. And Shay would just be like, fuck you, I'm not doing that. And if you want to drop me, drop me. And they would.
I could have gotten Shay to do whatever I wanted, I feel like.
But yeah, Shay was one of those kids who was just so authentic and so talented and just didn't have a desire to participate in those requests. And like, he didn't care about getting paid. He didn't care about getting press. Him and Alex were the same way. They just didn't care. You know, we're like, I think myself and Clayton and a lot of these people like would do anything for the sponsors. Like, we wanted to have this be a successful career, but I just got a lot of respect for those people who really take pride in doing it their own way. So it's badass.
Well, the way that you have done it has been pretty amazing, man. I mean, you've always been a businessman from the time you were like 14 years old. And while you were able to be a pro skier, which is a really, really hard thing to do, you pretty much lost all of that based on injury every year, but you had 4 years where you were supposed to be a big thing in skiing, and then the injury bug would hit that year and the next year, but you always had Stept to fall back on, man, and now Stept's going to be bigger than anything you could have ever done in skiing, and it's awesome to be able to see from when you were a little kid to where you are now, just you crushing it. So thank you for your time, dude.
Dude, thank you, pal. It's mutual, and yeah, I got so much respect for everybody in skiing, and it's the family that grew me to where I am today. So thank you so much for thinking of me for this thing. It's rad.
So that was time with Nick Martini, and man, another interview where injuries derailed a great thing. 4 shoulders, 4 ACLs, a spleen, and a tumor in like 5 years. Holy shit. It's amazing Nick is even close to where he is today, as it took a lot of heart to keep making movies through the pain and through the rehab. I would have quit a lot earlier than he did, and Nick even mentioned it, that it would have been a smart play to quit a little bit sooner. Hopefully Nick won't be in too much pain later on in life, but if he is, based on the work his studio is doing today, he should have the money to go full-on robot in the years to come. That's the podcast for this week. I want to thank you for listening, ask you to review the podcast on whatever platform you listen to it on, and if you're thinking to yourself, I listen every week and I should do that sometime, well, hopefully that sometime is today. If not, that's cool too. If you have any questions or concerns for me, please hit me up at mike@thepowellmovement.com. I will get back to you. Finally, I want to thank my amazing sponsors. They are Evo, Stanley, Spy Optic, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Have a great week, everyone.